Hello and welcome to the February 22nd episode of the Benmore Brief. Today, it's just a solo episode, although we should have some more guests in the coming days in the week. That being said, we have a couple interesting topics to go over. First and foremost is going to be our determination of what an FDE is. Now, I outlined this in my book, Forward Deployed, but I will talk about how we specifically define it here at Benmore Technologies, and then beyond that, we'll talk about sort of our version, and we're drawing inspiration from Palantir here, but our AI native version of essentially a central databank, and we're gonna call it Benmore Meridian, or just Meridian. But it's essentially our central data bank that our FDEs can leverage in conjunction with AI tooling to essentially optimize their deployed methodology, to optimize their deployed deliverables, to optimize their deployed, coding practices and all that stuff. It's slightly different from the Palantir model, but there's some rationale behind it. Then we'll talk about the data labeling that's going on behind that, and then lastly, we'll talk about our upmarket push into logistics. So basically, first and foremost, what is an FDE? Well, traditionally from what I understand, I'm not a consulting vet, but traditionally in, traditional consulting companies, you would have large swaths of teams getting essentially utilized on any given project. You would have, a principal, let's just say a technical services project, a principal, like a lead, 2 designers, 5 developers, support staff, DevOps, engineer, essentially a large staff. Now, with AI, and what Palantir did is they built a platform that allowed them to build software quickly. But essentially what AI has allowed, I think, an entry point into the FDE role, lower barrier to entry than what Palantir did. But basically what Palantir did is they built, and they targeted specific vertical, but they built a platform surrounding it. So they built a very customizable platform. But then behind that, what they did is they basically deployed implementers, who were software developers, and they were embedded on their clients' teams for, however long, a couple months. They learned the specific business problems, then they configured the existing platform to match the contract's needs. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily a new concept, because when I worked at Epic Systems, that's exactly what happened as well. They had a massive configurable platform, and then they had implementation teams that would again deploy on site with the health systems and then configure the application. They were essentially developers in their own right too. They all had to learn how to code and stuff like that. So, I don't know if that's necessarily a new concept. At least from my experience, it's been going on for a long time. From a platform perspective, though, now in pure consulting, there's no platform, right? There's no existing basis that can be configured. But with AI, and basically our analogy is that we are treating AI tools as our platform. Now, I'm going to talk about Meridian, which we're going to develop and essentially will become our platform, but an AI native platform. But we can utilize that forward deployed methodology now because of AI. We don't have to build out this robust, configurable, componentized platform and then deploy implementers to essentially embed on teams and then configure the platform. We can do the latter part of that, which is deploy engineers to embed on teams or embed with founders, and then utilize AI essentially as our platform. But previously you'd have to build essentially almost like a no-code platform, like such a robust platform that's hyper specialized to a specific niche. We can just do that with Claude Code now. So that's our definition of an FDE, is essentially a single developer that cuts through the traditional consulting hierarchy, that can deploy face-to-face with a client, determine their business needs, etc., and then utilize Claude Code essentially to rapidly build and tool a solution up for our clients. That being said, we have made the decision as of yesterday to essentially start developing our own AI native platform surrounding that. And so what that specifically looks like is over the course of 150 engagements, we have tons of data from code bases to soft skills to documentation to presentations, etc. And we're going to start building a meridian with like a central line to follow, which essentially AI can utilize and derive off of. So I'll give you an example. If there's a nuanced, niche, complex integration that we've done with a client, we are going to document that. We're going to make it easily usable with AI tools. And in doing so, the intelligence and context of doing one thing one time is essentially preserved. And in doing so, you can rapidly speed up essentially the iteration process. What we are not going to do, and we'll see how this pans out, maybe this is a bad decision, is fully componentize it. I don't think that we need to do that with AI. I think if we are taking the bet that AI tools are going to get faster, but what they're never going to do is expose private APIs because they're not public. You have to have the domain knowledge. You have to have the connections to do so. So we're going to make a specific effort to document many of the unsurfaced things that AI has not been trained on, tool that essentially document and databank them in a way that AI can utilize effectively. And that will be our IP. That will be our moat. Is essentially it's a context base, a meridian, a fine line that we can, utilize to build off of. And that's, I think, this concept was actually brought up by Tim naturally as we were doing integration partnerships. But he just decided, well, we can just make these things go a lot faster if we just document and templatize them in an AI native fashion. So that's something that I'm very excited about rolling out in the next couple months here. So we're making a concentrated effort to essentially document all of our code practices and make them AI native. I think we're going to see a ton of value on under the surface projects that we've done in niche industries and that we can replicate quickly if we document and utilize context effectively. So essentially, that's our definition of forward deploy. That kind of goes through the Meridian that we're building, Benmore Meridian. And then, we talked a little bit about the methodology behind that. I'm not going to expose how we plan on doing that. But essentially, the overarching consensus is we're going to essentially data label our code bases, data label our engagements, and build them in a way that's reusable by AI tools. The last thing that I'll talk about today, we're not going to go too much into the AI trends, is our upmarket push into logistics. So in general, I'm not going to completely go through our strategy here as one, it's currently developing, and two, it's our strategy. But in general, we talked yesterday on the show with Tim in relation to sort of an upmarket push. And with my free time, essentially, with Arkish leading and being head of forward deployed development, I have some free time to focus on founder-led sales. And so my entire purpose for the next year is going to be driving through logistics projects. And there's a whole bunch of reasons as to why I think that's going to work for us. One of which being the fact that we're in Chicago. We have existing relationships. I think we'll be able to enter into that market and that vertical effectively. But I'm also passionate about it. I've been working on logistics contracts for 3 years. It's where I got my start. I understand the industry relatively well and the terminology. And it's a Midwestern industry. It's in Chicago. I feel personally aligned with the industry as well, and I understand that you can't get too personally tied to incentives, but it doesn't hurt that I'm passionate about the industry. And honestly, a lot of our logistics clients have been my favorite ones to work with. So that's sort of like a push in that direction that we'll be utilizing. We'll be utilizing our framework, our processes, and then soon the Benmore Meridian to rapidly develop solutions for companies in that space. Again, we have a specific strategy that I'll be carrying out over the course of the next 10 months or so for the remainder of the year. But that was kind of a decision that came down the pipeline, is that we will be absolutely going after the logistics space as a new vertical that I'll kind of be championing beyond our existing sort of non-niched current client base. It's more size niche into SMBs, mid-market, and startups. But I do think that we have the knowledge, the talent, and the know-how to target a specific vertical, and so we'll be making that push over the coming months here, and I'm very excited about that. Anyways, relatively short episode, but yeah, a solo episode. Tomorrow, we'll be having Mitch Barton on, director of transformation at Sun Theory, a large cannabis holdings company with multiple dispensaries across the nation now at this point. So that's going to be a very interesting conversation. So make sure to tune in tomorrow. And later in the week, I think I may be able to bring back Jason Ford from Bell Bank. He's been on the Benmore Brief podcast before, and he's an AI native guy, a great guy, former UW hockey player. And, we'll be looking forward to hopefully having that conversation with him as well. But short episode today. Thanks for tuning in.